Speak now. Speak now. Speak now.
Next up is Scott Stager Piatkowski. He's with the Community Housing Transformation Center, or the Center. It's a catalyst for the transformation, sustainability, and growth of community housing across Canada. It offers grants, tools, and services to meet the needs of Canadians. Scott is an Ontario Program Manager for the Community Housing Transformation Center, a pan-Canadian organization promoting the growth and sustainability of the community housing sector. He works remotely out of his home office in Waterloo. He says he was pleased to accept the invitation from SAHA to talk about the funding and support offered by Community Housing Transformation Center. We exist to strengthen and grow the community housing sector across Canada, and outreach and information sharing is a big part of our work, he says. And I just want to tie this in because Boris was talking about how often these smaller centers get left behind, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted you to come. So give Scott a hand.
With so many different speakers, you have to adjust for height. So thanks for having me here tonight, and I'm delighted to see the turnout. I've been to events that sounded promising, and then a few people show up. So I'm very happy to see this turnout. So Nikki told you. Let's try this. There we go. A little bit about the Community Housing Transformation Center. So we are a creature of the National Housing Program. So when the current federal government was first elected in 2015, they pointed out that all levels of government in Canada had largely gotten out of the housing game, and the results were not really that surprising. It's the housing crisis that you see in your community that's happening in every community. So the National Housing Program was designed to catch up, to build new housing, but there was no real capacity across the country to do that, because the people who used to build affordable housing retired or moved on with their lives because there was no program available to them. So part of the National Housing Program was to create what's known as a technical resource center to help sustain, to grow, to build on best practices, and that is what the Community Housing Transformation Center is. We actually had to submit an RFP response because I don't know if any of you yourself or on behalf of relatives have applied for the new federal dental benefit. That's being run by Sun Life. Now, Sun Life is a part of my community in Waterloo, and I'm sure they're going to do a wonderful job, but it was conceivable that this technical resource center would have been run by the private sector, and the community housing sector wanted it to be run by people who were from the community housing sector. So we are an organization that has, its members include the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association, the Ontario Nonprofit Housing Association, the Cooperative Housing Federation of Canada, all the provincial nonprofit associations. So that's where our board members come from, and so we were created essentially to respond to this RFP, and we won a 10-year contract from CMHC to offer these services. So our goal is actually to increase the percentage of the housing market controlled by the community housing sector to 20%. because we think that's what's necessary to guarantee affordability. So that's one of our goals. And we want to do that by being a catalyst to grow the number of affordable homes in this country. And that's done through partnerships, it's done through grants, it's done through training, and I'll get into a little bit more of exactly the kind of thing that we fund. So let's try this again. Yes. Okay. So we have some guiding principles as an organization. Reconciliation with Indigenous people, eco-responsibility. We want to be a convener and a partner. So we're not looking to reinvent anything. We don't have any programs on our own. We work with organizations to create, to build on what they're doing, and not reinvent the wheel. So that's part of respecting the role of stakeholders. We also have a very strong equity mandate. So we are looking to help Black, Indigenous, and people of color with their particular housing needs, as well as other communities that have historically been marginalized. And then lastly, we want our own organization to be sustainable. So I mentioned the 10-year contract. We want to make sure that we exist in the long term. So we're building partnerships with a mind to long-term sustainability for the organization, which for me is good because it's job security. There we go. Okay, so objectives include innovation, education, identifying gaps in capacity, addressing systemic barriers, leveraging the existing capacity of the sector, funding. So in a lot of ways, when I left my job in the co-op housing sector to work for the Community Housing Transformation Center, the organization was still pretty new. So my old colleagues were like, wow, that's a great job. What exactly do you do again? And I said, well, we have money. And they said, okay, talk to us. So developing new resources as well. So we have a resource inventory on our website, which is widely accessible as well. So there's a number of special projects that we have. I'll talk about some of them. Services, tools, resources. Our website, center.support, has a lot of resources on it and links to other resources. I left by the door. There's a table with some leaflets, which I brought without knowing whether there would be a table or not, but we found a space, and my business cards are there as well. And then there's grants, which again is what most people are interested in. We have an Indigenous internship program, so some brilliant young Indigenous people from, currently our current cohort includes somebody from Iqaluit, somebody from rural Alberta, someone from Winnipeg, and someone from the Golden Horseshoe. And these are Indigenous people under 30 looking to work in the community housing sector, and we're the entry point for that. Mentioned our resource inventory. We also have a very strong IT infrastructure. We've got employees who provide support to people who are having difficulty registering for our website, that kind of thing. We also have an organizational compass. That's one of the flyers that's there as well, where you can kind of assess your organization to see how effectively you're run and build on the best practices of other organizations. But let's talk about money. So you're not in Quebec, but if you were, you could take part in something called Plancher, which is an acronym, and but plancher also means floor in French. And so it's a way of pooling the equity that existing housing providers, community housing providers have in order to fund new housing. It's quite innovative, and I'm really excited about it, and jealous that my colleagues in Quebec get to work with that. It's an example of what can happen when a provincial government, municipalities, and housing providers get together and pool their ideas. So maybe one day there'll be something in Ontario like plancher. I don't know if it'll be called plancher or floor or... if you lived in Nova Scotia, you could take part in the Community Housing Growth Fund. And I often tell people, well, we don't fund bricks and mortar. That is true, except in Nova Scotia, we do. The Community Housing Growth Fund is money that we have put up, and the government of Nova Scotia has put up in order to promote the growth of the land trust model. The Nova Scotia Nonprofit Housing Association is a brand new organization that we helped seed, and then the fund is available. So we actually have 3 program managers in Nova Scotia as opposed to 1 in Ontario, because of this extra money that the provincial government has provided. You don't have to be a big jurisdiction in order to do this. We have a partnership with the government of Nunavut, and my Inuktitut is even worse than my French, so I'm not going to try and say that. But it's we have a Nunavut Growth Fund, and the housing needs in that territory are really quite compelling. And then you deal with the fact that you know, you're paying $20 for a carton of orange juice at the grocery store. It's you know, the affordability crisis is even greater there. And our latest growth fund is in Newfoundland and Labrador. Again, not known as a wealthy province, but they have put forward $1.25 million, which is not quite matched, but we're contributing $250,000 a year to the Community Housing Growth Fund, and that will also be bricks and mortar. So generally, outside of those jurisdictions, so you're in Ontario, we have the Sector Transformation Fund local projects. So Linked Communities was funded under that, and some other projects that I'll talk about in a few minutes were as well that might be of interest to you. We also have a sectoral impact fund, so bigger projects that are designed to transform how the sector does business. So, for example, the Canadian Housing and Renewal Association worked with Indigenous organizations to create the National Indigenous Housing Collaborative, NICHI, and that was funded under that program. We have the other provincial growth funds that I've already dealt with. So, available to you now, the Local Projects Fund and the Sectoral Impact Fund. So, up to $150,000 under the local projects, but we tend to fund projects at $50,000 or less in order to spread the money around more effectively. You'll see some examples when I give you a list of some of the things that we funded. You'll say, oh, they got 150, maybe we could as well. Probably not. That was earlier in our life when we were not as well known and we didn't get as many applications. Now we are flooded with applications. The next deadline for applying for the Local Projects Fund is May 31st. That might be a little ambitious to start an application on May 23rd and get that in. Although it's a fairly easy application process. But we have a second round of allocations that closes October 31st and then a third January 31st. We used to have a no deadline policy, apply whenever you're ready. But what we found was that by the end of our fiscal year, which ends March 31st, we had no money left. So we looked at our budget last year for local projects, $1.2 million for the entire country, and we divided it into three, and set up deadlines, and it worked better because I think we were able to evaluate projects in relation to each other instead of just saying, well, this is a good project, let's fund it, and then found out that we were out of money. And then the sectoral impact stream actually has no application deadline. It does have a budget limitation. We can fund up to $500,000, but it really has to be something big and impactful. So there's an organization in Ottawa called CADCO. It's originally was an acronym, but now it's a word apparently. Centertown Affordable Housing Development Corporation. So CADCO has something called the Toolbox, where they teach people who want to make affordable housing how to do it. And these are people across the country. And so we funded that to the tune of $325,000. But other sectoral impact grants are smaller. So it depends on what you're doing. So through our life, we're in our fourth year of giving out money. Started in 2020, and we've given out a total of $28 million, $6 million of that in Ontario. There's been a number of things that have been pan-Canadian in nature, so aiming to achieve things coast to coast. And so we encourage you to apply. My business card is on the table, and I'm expecting to get all kinds of calls from Stratford tomorrow when I sit down at my desk. Now, what can't we fund? So we are not a bricks and mortar funder. So when we funded Link, it was to help them build their capacity to build housing. So we were not, the reason that we don't fund bricks and mortar in most of the country is that CMHC, which funds us, did not want us to be competing with programs that they had. They wanted us to fill a very narrow niche in the in terms of capacity building. So anything related to construction or renovation, health, social services, legal fees, operating costs. We don't provide individual support for housing, and when you have housing in your name and people are desperate for housing, they will call you for that. And so we obviously keep a list handy of where to refer people to, but that's not us. We set priorities for the year, and if something meets those priorities, it's more likely to be funded. So last year we said, well, we want to promote reconciliation. We want to make sure that our programs work outside of major urban centers, because we funded a lot of great projects in Ottawa and Toronto, Hamilton, but we were quite pleased to get the application from New Hamburg, and because it's not known as a hotbed of community housing, but as you saw in the video, the need is growing. So we're also looking for things that are transformative. It's not just the same old thing. So if you have an innovative way of doing something, I just reviewed an application today for 2 housing co-ops in Ottawa that are on leased land, leased from the University of Ottawa, which apparently needs the land. So they have to move if they want to exist. So they have existing members, they're merging and forming a new co-op in order to, and looking for land. So we'll see if we're able to fund them. It certainly piqued my interest that, because we hadn't had something explicitly like that. So we're not operating funding. We're not, so if a group comes to us and said, we need you to fund us for the next 10 years, we wouldn't be able to do that. We can't fund work that's already done. So if you have already done work and you have an invoice from your consultant, you can't come to us and say, we need you to pay this invoice. It has to be work that's approved in advance. We don't pay for fundraising, and we don't fund marketing. So I often say it's easier to tell you what we don't fund than what we do. But here's some examples of what we funded. So right here in Perth, we funded the United Way to help set up their community renewal company aimed at providing affordable housing development capacity in the 2 counties. And so I was just talking to Kathy before we started, and they are buying a building in Listowel. So that's quite exciting. I mentioned that we funded the mill block, so I got to go to an event. I do a lot of Zoom meetings. It's really nice to see people in person, and it was great to be at their event last summer. In London, we funded the Native Intertribal Housing Co-op. They were at the end of their mortgage. They are a scattered co-op, so individual homes, and they, in order to pay for repairs, they were deciding, okay, do we need to sell some of these units? What is our plan going forward? So we funded them. In Owen Sound, we funded a co-op called Glassworks. This is where I thought your eyes would light up, because we did give them $150,000. In the current more competitive fundraising environment, or funding environment, they'd probably get a little bit less than that, even though they did great work with that 150. In Waterloo, where I live, Supportive Housing of Waterloo Region, they were funded. They actually, there was an existing affordable building run by a service club called the Civitan Club. And like a lot of service clubs, their leadership was retiring, and they really didn't have the capacity to manage the building anymore, which they had been largely doing with volunteers for years. So they essentially gifted the building to Show. And Show now wants to expand on the existing property. And so we funded a feasibility study for them. Now, that's an example of an organization that has hard costs. So they said, can you fund these hard costs? And we said, sorry, we can't pay for your architect. We can't pay for your zoning variance. But we have helped them with the community consultation and so they got about half the money that they asked for. And then Georgian Bay Housing Development Corporation, another area similar to Huron-Perth, where there's not a lot of capacity to build affordable housing, but there is a great need. So we're helping them start up the organization. So there's an existing organization that is essentially the grant guarantor. And then in the land trust sector specifically, so we have funded the Muskoka Community Land Trust in Huntsville, the Ottawa Community Land Trust, Kensington Market. There's a cooperative housing land trust in Toronto, which is owned by the sector, and we help them grow their capacity as well. Not specifically a land trust, but it's a model often used by land trusts, social bonds. So there's a group in Minden called Places for People Halliburton, and we help them do a community bond issue, and they raised about $800,000. So it's that's not fundraising. It's attracting investment essentially, and so quite happy to hear more proposals from land trusts. It's really an exciting model. I mentioned, you know, these co-ops in Ottawa that are on leased land. Once the lease runs out, what do? The land trust model is more of a permanent solution. And then that is my contact information. Again, business cards on the back. And I will be around at the end to answer any questions that you have.